now joined from Lagos by Martins Oloja, who's a former managing director and editor-in-chief at the Guardian newspaper. And with us in the studios is Arise News analyst Mahmud Jega. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight on the news.
Thank you.
Well, let me begin with you, Mahmud Jega, in the studio here. I mean, this is over 3 decades after leaving office. Former head of state, Babangida, decided to speak his side of the story. But the question is, what did you make of the revelation? Why now? Does it answer all the questions raised about June 12, or does it just open another Pandora's box about the day?
Okay. I haven't seen the book yet. I will go down now to the bookshop and see if I can grab a copy. So without reading the whole book, and I also saw only part of the launching ceremony, which was broadcast live. We thank God for long life, because otherwise a major thing happened and it took 32 years or more before you now write the book and document it. If not because God granted long life, it would not have been possible to do that. As for revelations that you said, General Babangida said that he is now convinced that Chief Abiola won the election. I don't think that is much of a revelation, because you see, when this election was held, it was collated in all the states, and there are party agents there of the two parties, as well as business, media people and observers. So the result was fairly well known to everybody at the time. It was just that the collation and declaration at the NEC headquarters in Abuja was the one that did not take place, because it was stopped by a court order, and subsequently the annulment was made by the military government. So that was not much of a revelation. But probably the most important thing was that he recognized that mistakes were made, very serious mistakes of historical proportions, and he has apologized for it and regretted it, and even said if he had another opportunity, he wouldn't do things in the same way. Even after 30 years, I think it is good to say that kind of thing for something that shook and nearly destroyed the country during a part of its life.
If we can go to our guest in Lagos, Mr. Oloja, you've been listening to what Mahmud Jega has been saying. As someone who has extensively covered Nigerian politics, how do you interpret this revelation today from IBB? How weighty is it?
Well, as our brother Mahmud Jega has said, I think it is very good that he has written about it, because here our leaders don't die empty. They just don't write books. They don't reveal anything. They don't talk about their own policies and politics and their years as leader. They don't talk at all. But it is good that General IBB has written this book to put in context whatever has happened, to enable us to deconstruct his years as a leader, and especially that 1993, when this thing happened, more than 3 decades ago. And you know, as Mahmud Jega said, there's nothing, there's no revelation, there is no scoop in this thing, because the chairman of the electoral agency, the election management agency at that time, the late Professor Humphrey Nwosu, wrote a book on this, and he said exactly what General IBB wrote in his book. And Professor Omo Omoroye, who was a witness to that history, a professor of political science, who witnessed everything, who was very close to General IBB, also wrote a classic on this, and he wrote exactly what IBB wrote. He only confirmed, as the head of state at that time, what these two actors wrote before they died. And all those books are available. So as he said, the results were well known, have been published several times, and even President Muhammadu Babangida also did some things about all this result. They tried to do everything, but at the end of the day, the man died. The candidate, as the Guardian used to put it, that the presumed winner of that election died. He never enjoyed the mandate, and we will have deepened democracy. As General IBB was saying today, you know, they conducted election. It was a pan-Nigerian election. It would have deepened our democracy if they had released the result. But it is good that he is alive to regret it. He has apologized to the nation. And I think that we should continue from there. We should accept his apology. And we are democratizing, and we believe that our leaders, especially the current leader, should learn one or two things from what has happened. And we just call on other leaders, especially those of the former leaders there today. I think that they also should write their own.
Indeed. Okay, let me come back to you, Professor Mahmud. He says we should accept the apology and moved on. I think for a lot of people, they've moved on. But writing history is what he's also being commended for today. But before we move on, there are lots of questions that were raised. Mahmud Jega, I wonder if you have answers to some of them. He's taken responsibility today. He says he regrets it. But at the same time, he says he was outflanked. It raises question about who was in charge, because he outrightly blamed Abacha, his subordinate, for what happened on June 12 of 1993. So on the one hand, he's taking responsibility. On the other hand, he's claiming he wasn't totally in charge. What are your thoughts about that? And Mr. Oloja brought up, you know, that this has been written is not so much of a revelation. Have we talked enough about the role of the judiciary in our election? It looked like it did not start today. If you remember the Justice Ikpeme order to stop the June 12 election, have we talked enough about, has the judiciary taken responsibility of the role they played in that election? And what has happened to that order?
You're asking me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the first part of the question was about
who was really in charge? IBB says he was outflanked.
You see, I saw a report, I think, in the cable. As I said, I haven't yet read the book. I hope I will do so before the weekend. I saw a report in the cable saying IBB blamed Abacha for engineering the annulment. So, I would like to see it, because, you see, it's very difficult to believe. I was already a senior reporter during the Babangida regime, and he was the most powerful military ruler that we ever had in Nigeria's history. He was in total charge of his situation, so much so that at one point he dissolved the Armed Forces Ruling Council single-handedly and reconstituted it, and he didn't even see that at the time as a major thing that he did. So it is very difficult to hear that some people engineered something as serious as annulling the election without his knowledge or his permission. But I would like to see the full details. As for the judiciary, as you said, the judiciary helped seriously in setting the stage for what happened, because the Association for Better Nigeria, an NGO led by Chief Aso Nderibe, went to a federal high court in Abuja. Justice Basi Ikpeme gave an order on Thursday night, 2 days before the election, and ordered the National Electoral Commission led by Nwosu not to conduct the election. Now, NEC ignored the court order, which was a serious mistake. They didn't appeal it. They simply ignored it and went ahead and conducted the election on Saturday. And 2 days later, on Monday, the Chief Judge of the FCT High Court, Justice Dahiru Sali, now ordered NEC not to compile and publish the result because they held the election despite a court order. So this was what happened, and there was a lot of katakata, and then a week or so later, the State House, Aso issued a statement and said the election had been annulled entirely. So it's like the judiciary walked into the trap of the soldiers. And after that, many other things like different high courts in different cities were issuing orders to NEC. And I remember we interviewed the former president of the Court of Appeal, Justice Mahmud, and he said, what kind of foolishness is it that you get an order from one high court and another from another high court and another? Why didn't anybody go to the Court of Appeal and from there to the Supreme Court? Nobody did that. Instead, about 10 different high courts issued contradictory rulings. So the judiciary played an ignoble role, although it was the politicians that sucked them into it at the time.
Well, Mr. Oloja, if you can hear me, I just wanted to talk more about the results that you were talking about. In the appendix of that book, there's a result that's published. However, it's not from the Electoral Commission. I just wanted to talk about earlier, Adesua was asking Mahmud Jega if this will reopen more conversations about the legitimacy of that election. If the Electoral Commission may come out to officially make an announcement on that election.
Well, I think that Shakespeare would have answered this question this way, that whatever we are doing now is an academic exercise. He would have said it is like a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It doesn't signify anything. We can open up anything, we can debate it in the media, we can, the presumed winner died. Everything about it, the mandate died. Whatever we say about it now, 32 years after, is nothing. It does not add value to anything. We can only discuss it. We can only appeal to our leaders to be very, very careful with people's mandate. Whatever happened has happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. A book has been written. As I said, the book, I have read part of the book. I have read snippets, and I have also listened to the reviewer who did a good job. But at the end of the day, all the facts are sacred. All the facts we are talking about now, even in reference to not taking responsibility, blaming a dead man, like Abacha is not alive to say, I didn't do it, I wasn't the one. I think that should not be part of our conversation in 21st century. A leader is a leader. He should take, General IBB has apologized, he should take responsibility. That aspect of the book about blaming somebody else is not remarkable at all. It's not noble. He was the leader. He was powerful, and he should take responsibility, full responsibility for his action at that time. That anybody is just like anybody saying now, my wife misled me. My aide misled me. My vice president misled me into doing no. Nobody will accept that. It should take responsibility for that action that happened at that time. It was a tragic error on his part, and he is the hero of that tragedy. And I believe that he should take responsibility and let us move on, not to blame the dead. Because Abacha's people will come now. The late Professor Omorui also laid the foundation for this blame game. He chronicled the role in a graphic form, the role played by the late General Abacha at that time. And he wrote all these things. Most of these things are just direct facts from Omoruy's book. Everything blaming, but since the leader himself has come out to apologize, to say he would have done it differently, he should take responsibility.
Okay. All right.
And leaders of today, yes.
Okay,
so learn from that.
Yes, indeed. Mahmud Jega, the man IBB is a man of paradox, hasn't he been? I mean, he was even nicknamed the evil genius. This book talked about his truth about a lot of controversies. Let's move to the Awka coup, for instance. The role that Abacha played did he not get into prominence, really, when he saved IBB from that Oka coup?
General Abacha was already prominent. I mean, he was the chief of army staff from August 1985 when Babangida led the coup that overthrew the Muhammadu Buhari regime. So Abacha was already very well known. He was a man of few words. Sometimes he speaks on television. I remember the first coup, the Vatsa coup, when journalists accosted him at the airport and said, but why should you execute them when the coup was not even launched? Because unlike the Oka coup, the Vatsa coup had not even unfolded. And he said no. He used his baton and was slapping his palm. He said, in the military, planning coup, carrying out coup, the same punishment, which is death penalty. So he was already a specialist in coups. And of course, the Oka coup, they nearly got IBB because he had to run. But Abacha was able to rally troops, and they now put it down. So obviously, he will become more powerful and more prominent after that. But that was not the beginning of his prominence. I don't think so. After all, he was the officer who announced the coup of December 31st, 1983, that overthrew the civilian regime of President Shehu Shagari. So from that day, he was well known in Nigeria.
Okay, before we continue the conversation, we have a sound bite from former Vice President Yemi Osibanjo at that event, if we can play it now.
Although I am on record to have stated after the elections that Abiola may not have won the elections, upon deeper reflection and a closer examination of all available facts, particularly the detailed election results, which are published as an appendix to this book, there was no doubt that MKO Abiola won the June 12th elections. Upon closer examination of the original collated figures from the 110 polling booths nationwide, it was clear that he satisfied the two main constitutional requirements for winning the presidential elections, mainly majority votes and geographical spread. Having obtained 8,128,720 votes against Tofa's 5,848,247 votes, and securing the mandatory 1/3 of the votes cast in 28 states of the Federation, including Abuja. I am gratified that the Buhari administration finally recognized him as a former head of state of Nigeria.
Former Vice President Professor Yemi Osibanjo, the reviewer of the book today, so he was quoting the former head of state, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. Mahmud Jega, I would like to stay with you for a moment. I've been able to gloss over the book in the little time I've had. The question of Delegiwa came up in chapter 10 of this book, and IBB basically dismissed the claims of government involvement, arguing that an official plot would not leave obvious traces pointing back to the government. What's your response? I know you said you've not read this book, but I have summarized what it basically said in chapter 10 about the Delegiwa question, saying he said whoever hit Delegiwa was hitting him because they knew of his closeness to Delegiwa as a journalist.
Well, the killing of Delegiwa in late 1986 was again one of the most tragic episodes in contemporary history of Nigeria. I was in a orthopedic hospital when it happened, and we were watching on television. Now, of course, I will not be surprised if General Babangida should distance himself and the government, and especially the two chief security officers of his regime, who the media at that time was blaming. The remarkable thing is that it is nearly 40 or 50 years now, 40 at least, and up to now, we have not been able to find out exactly. If the government says it is not the one, okay, most probably that is true, but they also had the responsibility of fishing out the culprit, because it's not anybody who could do that, properly parcel a bomb and get a rider to deliver it to his house and even write on it that it is from the president, because before the Legiwa opened the parcel, he said it is from the president, which was why he opened it and the thing just exploded on his lap. So why is it that after 40 years, the authorities have not been able to produce whoever the culprit was? And that is exactly the major failing, because even if you didn't do it, you are responsible for finding out who did it. And not just the Babangida regime, even the regimes that came after that, several of them, no one has as yet told us who exactly killed Delegio. And there was also something I remember at the time it happened. My colleague said, don't worry, we will one day hear who killed Delegio, because conspiracies have a way of unraveling after a time. If more than one person does something, 2 or 3, one day something will happen, either they quarrel or something, and somebody will repeat. But up to this time, we have not had that, which is very surprising.
Okay, just quickly, our guest in Lagos, Martins, I just wanted to get your view on another part of the book where it talks about General Babangida's story in 1991 when Abuja was officially Nigeria's capital, relocating from Lagos. You were at the forefront of that. You were the editor of Abuja Newsday, I think the city's first newspaper. I just wanted you to reflect on that period and what it meant.
Well, definitely it was a very great time, specifically on 12th December, Thursday, 12th December 1991. Just lessons from this launch. For even our leaders were hearing how IBB assembled some of the best and brightest brains in the country to run the country at that time. And it's a great lesson. Even Abuja that we are talking about, he put life to Abuja when he relocated. And all these areas we are talking about now, Maitama, Wuse 2, and other areas, it was when he got to Abuja that he began to build all those things like that, critical infrastructure that they put in Abuja. When the story comes to be written, you will see that the role he played in building the Federal Capital Territory that we are talking about today that you can't recognize. And IBB will have some credit in the policies and politics that made Abuja to be one of the best projects that Nigeria had ever completed in our history. And I think we need to learn that from him, that when you want to be like a Real Madrid, as a football team, as a country, as anything, you need your Mbappe, you need your Rodrigo, you need your Vinicius Junior. You need those things, meaning that for you to achieve and to be great as a leader, you have got to assemble the best and the brightest brains in the country from all shades, a pan-Nigerian team. Some of the brightest and the best all over the world, assemble them to achieve your objective. That was the part of the lessons from what IBB himself. He was reading out names of the people who helped him to achieve what he achieved. So it's a lesson to leaders that you cannot afford to assemble a cabinet of mediocrities. You cannot afford to put people from your area alone to be running great operations, to be doing great things like that. Give the job to the brightest and the best in the country, and then you will take the credit in the end. That was one lesson that we should learn from the gathering today.
Before we wrap up, Mahmud Jega, I wanted to ask you, when you look at the roll call as you have on your TV screens at the moment at this event, as controversial as you would like to think that IBB is, he was able to pull this crowd. But then the question really is, someone has raised concerns, some people may raise concerns actually, about the guard of leadership. When you look at the crowd in that hall today, I mean, former presidents, former heads of state, they all seem like from the same class. Do you see a handshake anytime soon from, including the current president, Bola Tinubu? Do you see any handshake across the old guard and the new anytime soon when it comes to leadership in Nigeria? Because these men were young when they were in power.
Honestly, I mean, it is such a grand occasion of the kind that we have not had. But again, you attribute many things to the passage of time. I can imagine maybe 10 or 15 years ago, if you had asked Abiola Tinubu to attend an occasion honoring General Babangida when he had to flee the country and was in exile, probably he would not have done so. But you know, after 40 years, after the third events of the June 12th election, as my friend Martin Oloja was saying, it is time to move on. A man has come forward with regret of something that happened 40 years ago. We should accept it and move forward. In any case, he has done major service by writing a book. The late Professor Cheikh Anta Diop said, our tragedy in Africa is that when an elder dies without writing a book, as most of them don't do, it's like a $10 million library has been set on fire because he goes away with all the knowledge and the experiences. And also, you know, IBB, honestly, despite, if not because of June 12th and the annulment, he would probably have gone down as one of the best leaders in Nigeria's history because he was quite dynamic, he was very effective, he built many institutions, he did a lot of critical infrastructure. And even an electoral system. Exactly. It was just that it didn't end well because of the June 12th election annulment. Otherwise, he was an extremely effective ruler during his 8 years in power. A fine place to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Martin Oloja, former managing director and editor-in-chief of the Guardian newspaper, as well as the Rise News analyst, Mahmud Jega. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.